We're live. We've just come to the end of day 10 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. I'm joined once again with Dave Morris. We've just heard the end of Gabrielle Bosley's evidence. Dave was on this morning. It was Gabrielle all this afternoon. I would say, obviously many of the witnesses are brilliant. I think that she was particularly brilliant. She came across incredibly well. And also, we got the impression that John Mitting really enjoyed her evidence. I think Gabrielle did a particularly good job. I've just seen a thumbs up from Sir John Mitting then as he walked past. Dave, what did you think of today's evidence?
Very, very powerful. Obviously, my evidence, I was glad to do the second part of my evidence. And I was particularly keen to talk about the McLibel case, which is a massive miscarriage of justice in the light of the role that the undercover officers played from the beginning throughout the campaign and case. They were interfering with the legal system. They were collaborating with McDonald's. They were monitoring Keir Starmer, who was helping us for nothing for 10 years throughout the case with legal advice. And so that was an aspect of the case, of the inquiry, which I think hasn't received the attention up to now that it should have been receiving. So, the actions of these spies have consequences, not just for the individuals they targeted, but for the corruption of the legal system, and many people suffering collateral damage from what they were doing, which was all, they had their own agenda.
Also, I would add to that society at large, right? Because the effect of what these undercover officers did had an effect on how society has developed over the last 50 odd years.
Yes, they're trying to undermine campaigning organisations, campaigning movements. In reality, I don't think they had, as a unit, a huge effect on that. But the police as a whole have an obsession with maintaining the status quo of oppression and exploitation, and they have to characterise those who are challenging the status quo as somehow beyond the pale, and whereas in fact, the movements that campaigners are part of, as we've been saying throughout this inquiry, are on the right side of history. One point that came out today was that McDonald's were trying to suppress criticisms of their company, but if you look at the criticisms being made, everybody would agree with them, and some of them have now been enshrined in law. So, for example, the targeting of children with their advertising campaigns. It's now recognised that children should not be bombarded with junk food advertising, before the 9 o'clock watershed. Now, Gabrielle made that point in her evidence this afternoon, and that's now been made illegal. Hunt sabbing, which was an activity which the undercover officers have characterised as, kind of direct action, and they're all wild anarchists. Actually, it was just about people trying to stop the hunting of foxes for pleasure by these hunters, and that's now been made illegal. And so many other things that the movements that were targeted by the Spycops have now been either been declared illegal or at least mainstream activities.
Yeah, no, absolutely the case. One of the things we've remarked on a number of times when we're reflecting on what's happened at the inquiry is how much of this process is an element of us learning our own social history.
Yeah, it's a real learning experience. I have to say, that history is a living thing. It's not just what happened in the past. It's also how it influences how we think about things in the present. And often I think people trying to make a better world today don't realise the incredible efforts made in the past, and we're standing on their shoulders. So it's a continuum rather than some kind of a academic pursuit what happened in the past. So this is living history with consequences, not just in terms of the bad things that the police were doing, but also the great things that campaigners were doing that we're now standing on their shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was quite struck with in Gabrielle's evidence, she talked about working on a debt crisis leaflet and campaign about targeting like the World Bank and the IMF, and it just made me think of the sort of activism I was involved with maybe 15-20 years after that, kind of going to these large summits and talk exactly the same talking points she was working on then, and you've really seen those links. We saw it a lot with the McDonald's campaign, the sort of seeing how it kind of developed over time, and these are aspects of our own history that I've got to be honest, I was not fully aware of until I started following the inquiry so closely.
Yes, and often, people these days, they think they're the first people to think of something, but actually you realise, this goes back decades, if not centuries. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned in my evidence was that Helen first got involved with London Greenpeace because of the Aboriginal land rights struggles in Australia. And land struggles have been going on for centuries and centuries. And it's not just about Australia, it's in this country as well, people being thrown off the land. In fact, you can link that to hunt sabbing, because the hunting was the blood sports, was the pastime of the nobility and the royal family, and they declared whole areas of the country they forced people off their land so they could use them as hunting grounds.
And of course the red coats about the king's livery being displayed and all this sort of stuff. They're all very linked.
Yeah, I mean, now it's a sort of a bit of a laughable event at coronations and things like that, where you see people wearing these fancy clothes. But this actually goes back in history as why they're doing it is because it links to those historical moments. So yes, powerful stuff, I think, today, and also very personal.
Yeah, incredibly personal. There were certain aspects of Gabrielle's evidence where she talked about some very deeply personal things, which I'm not going to touch on here. But if anybody follow the when the transcript comes out, when the video comes out, they should check out. But she talked about how the vulnerabilities that she had as a young woman, and she talked about hearing from Neil Woods, the former drug cop who wrote Good Cop Bad War, who was an undercover police officer who infiltrated drug gangs, and him talking about the methods of undercover infiltration.
They target vulnerable people who they can manipulate.
Yeah. It's about finding the most vulnerable person within a group and putting yourself right next to that person. I mean,
it's not just individuals with vulnerabilities, but also younger people who are maybe not so experienced, and a lot of younger people starting to get involved with London Greenpeace, who were very enthusiastic and open-minded and idealistic, and I think people like Bob Lambert felt that, I can work on these people. I can manipulate. I can isolate people. I can work on to get them to do things. Like he got Gabrielle to buy him etching fluid to do graffiti, and no doubt then it's trying to get people into a sort of certain secret activities, and then they get classed as ALF activists. And then he can write reports on her for years after that, saying she was an ALF activist. And in fact, he's kind of he's kind of manipulating people so that he can carry on writing reports for his superiors, and they think, he's doing a great job here. He's really at the centre of things.
I mean, there was one. We saw this one report, which was mostly appeared to be written by Bob Lambert about Gabrielle.
All of it was inaccurate.
Well, I was just going to say. I mean, there was a large number of items that were said about her. I think, there was stuff about kind of what the sort of activism that she was involved with, who she was associated with. It claimed that her boyfriend was someone who she was very clear she never dated. The only part of that which I think appeared to be truthful was that she was articulate and intelligent. I mean, everything else within it was a complete lie.
Yes. Yeah, so, these are trained liars, and they lied in their reports about people.
But, I mean, more than just the lying.
They lied to everybody that they were infiltrating, and no doubt they're going to come when they give evidence and lie again.
Yeah. No, I'm just going back to that point I started making earlier about Neil Woods and the manipulation of vulnerable people. I mean, it's something which I think is really key. And this isn't just that, like, say Bob Lambert looked around and went, oh, there's a vulnerable person, I can manipulate them. But rather, this is the core aspect of undercover work. And the reason why Neil Woods, who, remember, didn't do any political work, was purely targeting drug gangs, very, a lot of very... he locked up a very large number of people with his work, so that he couldn't live with himself from doing the work, because the heart of doing the work, the very central part of it, the thing, the basis of it, is about manipulating and abusing the most vulnerable person you can possibly find. And that there is something particularly distasteful at the very heart of any form of undercover work, that it goes deeper than just how these individual officers made any individual choices, but rather the basis of the entire deployment.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Was that a question? But yeah.
I mean, it's not a question. I mean, to be honest with you, beyond the first bit about, like, what do you think, none of these are questions.
They focused on their tactics generally, and I mean, to me, it's about our movements. Often we kind of fixate on these officers and the tactics they use, because we have to, because that's what the inquiry is about. But to me, aren't hearing again about these movements that were, and the genuine commitment of thousands of people in these movements to do the right thing and to address cruelty or unfairness or injustice. How inspiring is that? So I think we need to do, throughout this inquiry, we need to fundamentally, be inspired by the movements they were trying to undermine.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it for this week. There's nothing sitting tomorrow. We'll be back again on Monday, where we have got the evidence of Timothy Green, and followed by Albert Beale. Those should be interesting. Do you want anything to say about Timothy Green and Albert Beale's evidence on Monday? What we're likely to hear?
Both lovely people. I'm sure that they'll give a good account of themselves.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I'll do a Twitter Spaces this evening. If anybody was following proceedings, please do tune in. If you weren't following, tune in as well. Let us know if you've got any thoughts. Anybody's got any questions, please just get in touch. Thanks for joining us, Dave. Anything you want to add?
No, that's fine.
Cheers. All right, thanks for joining. Bye for now.